super. I love it. Even that sets it everybody is saying it's great. What are you doing with us? Taking a different place, Good morning. Thank you all so much for coming out. Is that coming across a little bit? I'm on my tiptoes. I think. Right. So I'm Pam Stranahan, Vice President for the History Center. Unfortunately, our president was detained due to some family health issues. So you get me this morning. Actually, what I'd like to do, first of all, is introduce a couple of our board members. Joe Fox is over here with the hat on. And Maureen Winkleman is a former board member, but the person who does lots related to all of the exhibits. And our administrative assistant, Amy Parker, who's at the back. A lot of you have talked to her from time to time, but she's the person who puts together our posters. So we really, really appreciate all that she does when we're in mode to get a new exhibit up and running, which is what we're celebrating today, really. We're celebrating our heritage from the range, and that is ranching and then farming. And so I think you're going to have a really good time seeing the exhibit, and we hope that you're going to really have a wonderful time out here. We've got wonderful Dutch oven cooking, okay, that's going to be done by Edwin and Sarah, and I'm sorry, you have one more assistant. Jacob, okay, and they've come from Parks and Wildlife. They set up yesterday, and they've had the fire going all morning, so that's going to be really interesting. They've set up, I don't think you call it a camp, but maybe it's like a cow camp.
Yeah.
You want to come comment about how you're set up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Come tell us, because it's really fascinating, and everybody might not be able to hear it all at once.
Hi, everybody. I'm Edwin Quintero. I'm the park superintendent at Goose Island State Park. And then with me, I have Sarah Rock. She's our interpreter, our education programs interpreter. And then I have Jacob Samora. He's our park operations trainee for state parks here at Goose Island. Today, we're going to be doing a program very similar to what the chuck wagon cookies would do out on the trail or in the camp if they're rounding out cattle, branding cattle. Typically, this is kind of a similar setup, a little bit in smaller scale. So today we're going to be cooking a little bit of the traditional Texas bread, pan de campo, cowboy bread. Very, very simple ingredients. We're going to be over here kind of working and doing a little bit of that. As you kind of go along through the program, just feel free to stop by. We'll show you how we do that. And if you're interested, we can give you those recipes. It's super, super simple recipes, probably about 5 or 6 different type of ingredients, and it's really straightforward. So thank you so much for inviting us out here. Thank you.
So I just want to mention a few things about the exhibit inside. I think that for me, this was a really fun exhibit to put together because there's so much history in Aransas County. And when you look at it, a lot of the ranching actually goes all the way back to the Spanish missions. So the Spanish mission, which our closest one is now at Goliad, but that was the one that really brought in the cattle initially, okay, the Spanish cattle that came up from Mexico. And after that, they had a lot of Spanish settlers who came up, and this is Spanish before Mexico. Then, of course, Mexico declares its independence, so even more settlers come up from Mexico. So we definitely have the Hispanic influence all around, especially Victoria and West. And then we have the Irish settlers come in, and it's names like O'Connor that you're familiar with. And they come in and get their homesteads because they're early people here in the 1830s. And we have the O'Connors that had the ranch all the way from Salt Creek, for those of you who know Salt Creek on 35, all the way up through Victoria. And then we also have other families that come in. Of course, the Coleman Fulton Pasture Company becomes a really huge operation. And it goes all the way to Taft and Sinton And Joe Fox can definitely tell you more about that, having been over as the educator at the Fulton Mansion. We do have a poster that he put together that's inside. So we want you to learn more about that. Then what happens, ranching isn't so great after all. And those big ranches begin to sell off after the turn of the century, after 1900. They begin to sell off and people get farm plots. They get farm plots and little plots in towns. And the towns, the Fulton Coleman Pasture Company becomes Taft, Sinton, Mathis. All of those towns are where that pasture company extended. And when they begin to sell off the plots for farms, then those little towns form to be the community towns for those areas. So it's a really continuing story. I think it's absolutely fascinating as far as that goes. We also thought it would be real fun for you to see what places today can you see ranching. So we have posters on 3 different entities. 2 of them are state parks where you can actually, they're still working ranches, and we think you'll enjoy all of that. You'll notice inside that we've also got stories of families. We've got stories of the Brundrett family, and we've got stories of the Roquette family. And you'll see how extensive the Roquette family holdings were. They had pastures, just little pastures, over at the airport, out where Cape Valero is, and a couple of more. So as their grass would be shorn off by the cattle, they would have to move their herds to different locations, even on into the 1950s. So you're going to see some of those photographs that are really, really, really fun. So I think you're going to enjoy that, and probably enjoy cooling off. But before you do, I want to introduce you to our entertainment tonight, or this morning. Okay, we have Wayman and Brenda, and they are going to do some bluegrass for us, maybe some storytelling.
Good morning. Good morning. We're glad you're here, and we're extremely happy to be here. This is my beautiful red-headed wife. First time I saw her, she was standing in a cornfield. I said, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I want to marry her. And I walked right up in that cornfield and I kissed her right there between the ears. She hates it when I do that. My name is Wayman Putnam Williams III. And there's actually 4 of us named that. 2 of them are deceased. My granddad and my dad are both deceased, and I'm the 3rd, of course. And then my son, Wade, we call him Wade because you get too many Waymans and it gets a little confusing. So, but he is the 4th. My first name, from what I understand, and I've read a little bit, I saw a tombstone of a Confederate soldier that had died, and I think it was my great-grandmother's uncle or some part of her family, and his name was Wayman. So I guess she grabbed onto that and named her son Wayman Putnam Sr. Wayman. The name Putnam is my great-grandmother's maiden name, and so she stuck that in there. And because of that, I know about the Putnam family, and I have a great uncle whose name is James Putnam. He was a Texas Ranger. You know, after the Civil War, there was a lot of bad guys in Texas. They didn't have much law in Texas at that time because of the war, and so I just figured that my great uncle Jim Putnam, Texas Ranger, spent a little time chasing bad guys. So we're gonna sing a little song about a bad guy that you know about today. Come on, Brenda. Jesse James was a man who rambled through the land. He robbed many a bank and train. He was leader of the band, the bold and wicked band, Many are the people that was slain. Oh, no more Jesse James, no more Jesse James, for they laid poor Jesse in his grave. As he went to turn his head, little Bobby shot him dead, and they laid poor Jesse in his grave. Jesse was an awesome shot, his bullet found the spot. His aim was deadly and true. With his pistol by his side, he wandered far and wide, as many a poor robber man do. Oh, no more Jesse James, no more Jesse James, for they laid poor Jesse in his grave. As he went to turn his head, little Bobby shot him dead, and they laid poor Jesse in his grave. Jesse James had a wife who mourned all her life because of Jesse's wicked ways. She couldn't stay his hand or stop the robber band. Her grief made her old and gray. Oh, no more Jesse James, no more Jesse James, for they laid poor Jesse in his grave. As he went to turn his head, little Bobby shot him dead, and they laid poor Jesse in his grave. Jesse's end came at last from a bullet quick and fast, from comrade he trusted in his band. But the debt he paid was just when they laid him in the dust. He had been such a terror in the land. Oh, no more Jesse James, no more Jesse James, for they laid poor Jesse in his grave. As he went to turn his head, little Bobby shot him dead, and they laid poor Jesse in his grave. And they laid poor Jesse in his grave. You know, the young folks had to meet each other, and there was not a lot of entertainment in those early years here in Texas. And my dad told me that my grandma and my granddad met on an old wooden bridge over the Medina River. The kids would go out there at night, and they might get some old trucks or cars on either end and turn on the headlights on that old wooden bridge, and they'd get out there and do what young people do, and that's where they met. So this little song reminds us of a couple that met and as they walked through life. I need that. Keep playing. Oh, that's better. It was the first time ever he saw her. He saw his future in a long white cotton gown sitting there in the church house. She's gonna get baptized. They're gonna have a dinner on the grounds. Very next Friday, he got off at the sawmill. He slicked his hair back, had a pocket full of pay as she opened up the front door. He's a grinning like a possum as he handed her a daisy. She heard him say, "Hey, let's go dancing to the tune of a $20 bill. They got a fine fiddle band at the barn up on the hill. And by midnight they just might wind up dancing, standing still by her daddy's lantern light. They're walking home." They got married, it was no time. They saying their goodbyes. He's a-going to the Civil War about a lifetime later. She's a-waiting at the depot. He said, "I ain't gonna leave you, no, never, no more. Hey, let's go dancing to the tune of a $28 bill. Got a fine fiddle band at the barn up on the hill. And by midnight they just might wind up dancing, standing still by their father's lantern light. They're walking home." Well, they got home from the war. And they bought that pretty little white framed house down there on the corner. Had the prettiest little picket fence you ever saw, and had climbing rose bushes on that. And they raised 4 beautiful daughters, and they had grandkids. And that couple, they loved those grandkids. In front of friends and family and all the grandkids in the same little church house. In a long white cotton gown, he bent down and he kissed her. Said, I'm right behind you, honey. Wasn't long till we laid him in the ground. Now they're dancing to the tune of a $20 bill. They got a fine fiddle band at the barn up on the hill. And by midnight they just might wind up dancing stylish still. By their father's lantern light they're walking home. By their father's lantern light they're walking home. My grandpa, he's the one that was alive that I remember. I don't remember the other ones, stories that we've heard. But my grandpa, he'd moved from cattle ranching, and he was up in Bear County. And he had a dairy farm. And I was fascinated with that dairy farm. I remember going in the milking barn, and they had these tubes up there, and they had milkers for them when I was little, and I could see that milk coming down those tubes. And on one end down there, they had what they called a chiller, and it was about this wide, and it had these little metal round things on it all the way down. I don't know how they chilled them, but they were chilled. And down at the very bottom, there was an old tin cup. And that tin cup had hang there, and I think everybody at that dairy farm had drank out of that old tin cup at one time or another. And they'd have the milk bucket at the bottom of that tin cup. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad said, yeah, go up there and get that tin cup, get you some milk coming out of there. So I went out there, as a little guy, went out there and got that cup, and I stuck it under there, and I got a big old cup of that milk with the cream still in it. He had Jersey cows, and they gave such rich milk. They hadn't separated the cream from it yet. And I drank that milk, and I remember I felt like I had a brick in my stomach after I drank all that. But it was good memories of my grandfather and his dairy farm. All right, sweetie, are you tuned? She is a fanatic about tuning. She just can't play it out of tune. Come over here and help me sing this one. Grandpa was a farmer when I was a kid. Never made much money, but he loved what he did. He'd get up in the morning, go milk his cows, get out his old team of mules and go to the fields and plow. Take us to church on Sunday, taught us how to pray, and I remember the things he used to say. He'd say, young'uns, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget how God's been good to you. Be proud you was raised in the country. Stand up for the old red, white, and blue. It won't hurt to get a little dirt on your britches when you go out into the woods and pray. Young'uns, don't forget where you came from, where I'm going, and will you meet me there someday? Play it, Brenda. while I walked the fields he planted. The day he passed away, brother Val will meet again on one glorious day. But until then, I'll keep working, tending to his fields, hoping I can do the things the way my grandpa did. He'd say, young'uns, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget how God's been good to you. Be proud you was raised in the country. Stand up for the old red, white, and blue. It won't hurt to get a little dirt on your britches when you go out into the woods and pray. Young'uns, don't forget where you came from, where I'm going, and will you meet me there someday? He'd say, young'uns, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget how God's been good to you. Be proud you were raised in the country. Stand up for the old red, white, and blue. It won't hurt to get a little dirt on your britches when you go out into the woods and pray. Young'uns, don't forget where you came from, where I'm going, and will you meet me there someday? Where I'm going, and will you meet me there someday? You know, grandparents are so important. Grandparents are very important, and we have 9 of them. And we enjoy them little rascals. We really do. There's peanut butter stains on stuff and stuff strewed everywhere. But yeah, I'm so glad I have some memories about my grandfather and out there at that old dairy farm. It was really stuck in my head, some of the things that happened out there. My dad, my granddad, they got me out of the corral one time, and there was a calf in there, and I was a little guy. And they kept telling me, grab his leg and throw him over. And I was in that pen with him, and I was trying to throw that old calf over, and I was in there, and I fell down, and it was kind of sloppy in there, and I can remember them just having a good old belly laugh at me rolling around in that stuff. So, you know, one thing that they had a little community church, and that's where a lot of the teenagers could see each other at church. And there's a cemetery right behind that church. Matter of fact, my great uncle Jim Putnam is buried there. My great grandpa H.C. Williams and Angelina are buried in that cemetery back there. And there's another lady that's buried in that cemetery. Her name was, everybody just called her Aunt Chloe. And she was a single lady, and everybody in the community just knew her. And when she died, they buried her out there at Oak Island Cemetery. And you know how teenagers are, they get things going, and they said that when there was a full moon, that you could go out there to Aunt Chloe's grave, and you could go out there full moon at midnight and lay your hand on Aunt Chloe's grave, and you'd say, "How you doing, Aunt Chloe? How you doing?" And she'd say, "Nothing at all." My dad, he told me that when I was a kid, and I was like wide-eyed, and I remember that. But, yeah, what a story. There's a little mountain church in my thoughts yesterday, where friends and family gathered for the Lord, where an old-fashioned preacher taught the straight and narrow way for what few coins the congregation could afford. Looking back now, that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard the words base my life upon. Play it, Brenda. We dress in our Sunday best, sit on pews solid oak. I remember how our voices filled the air, how Mama sounded like an angel on those high soprano notes. And when the roll was called up yonder, I'll be there. Looking back now, that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard the words base my life upon. We'd have all-day Sunday sings with dinner on the grounds. Many were the souls that were revived, while my brothers and sisters who've gone on to glory land sleep in peace in that maple grove nearby. Looking back now, that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard the words base my life upon. I first heard the words base my life upon. You know, we tend to remember all the good stories, but you know, as we have tough times in life and things happen, and I know back then they lived a much tougher life than we did. It was really tough. They'd have crop failures, and if the rain didn't just come just right, and it was tough on those people. They had to be hard, tough people that worked hard to do things. But from time to time, some of them would lose a farm or something, and it was pretty devastating for the community when that would happen. There's a little white note on the gate by the road that a man put up yesterday. And when we saw it, we all ran out just to see what it had to say. And when we read it, our eyes filled with tears and we fell to the cold, hard clay. Something about a mortgage, something about foreclosure, something about failure to pay. And on the post by the general store, they put up a little sign. An auction sale day after tomorrow at the end of Lincoln Line. 30 years of farming, 30 years of heartache, 30 years of day to day. Oh, my daddy stopped talking. The day the farm was auctioned, there was nothing left to say. My mama's tears fell freely down as she walked among the flowers in the yard. And every number the auctioneer called was like a blow to her dear old heart. And every number the auctioneer called meant another thing it sold that day. We stood there watching as everything was auctioned, and they loaded it and drove away. And on the post by the general store, they put up a little sign. An auction sale day after tomorrow at the end of Lincoln Line. 30 years of farming, 30 years of heartache, 30 years of day to day. Oh, my daddy stopped talking. The day the farm was auctioned, there was nothing left to say. He got up early next morning, there was nothing for us to do. No hay in the meadow, no grain in the granary, no cattle, no tractor, no tools. So we loaded up the car, few things we saved, and the clothes we had on our back. Mama read from the book. We took one last look, and then we drove away. And on the post by the general store, they put up a little sign. An auction sale day after the barn at the end of Lincoln Line. 30 years of farming, 30 years of heartache, 30 years of day to day. Oh, my daddy stopped talking. The day the farm was auctioned, there was nothing left to say. My grandpa, they lived on that dairy farm, of course. And the house they lived in, I think that house was built back in the 1800s somewhere. And I was talking to my sister about it, Lee over here. I was talking to her about it the other night, and I said, you know, that house was scary. It was kind of creepy looking. And let me tell you, they didn't waste a dime on paint for that house. It was I don't from my recollection as a kid, I don't know how it was still standing, but they lived in that. And I remember one time after my grandpa had passed away, my dad and I went out to see Molly, my step-grandma, and they were in there talking, and it was kind of creepy inside. You know, they had one cord coming down, and they had the light bulb screwed in there, and that was all the lighting in it. Lee even said, yeah, it was kind of dark in that old house, and it was. And I was sitting there, I was a little bitty guy, and Daddy was talking to Molly, and Molly said something about a raccoon. The raccoon had gnawed a hole in the floor and had come up in the house. And when she said that, my eyeballs got about that big, and I was looking around for that raccoon. But yeah, that old house, it was creepy. All right, Brenda. This old house was to my children, this old house was to my wife. This old house was home and shelter as we fought storms of life. This old house was framed with laughter, this old house heard many shout. Now she trembles in the darkness when the lightning walks about. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, ain't gonna need this house no more. Ain't got time to fix shingles, ain't got time to fix the floor. Ain't got time to oil the hinges or to mend the window pane. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, I'm getting ready to meet the saints. Play it, Brenda. She gets to playing it faster and faster. I have trouble keeping up with her. Look at her, she's grinning at me now. She slowed down. Now my old hound dog likes to sleeping 'cause he don't normally. Else he'd wake up by the fireplace and he'd sit there and howl and breathe. But my hunting days are over, ain't gonna hunt the coon no more. Gabriel done brought in my chair when the wind blew down the door. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, ain't gonna need this house no more. Ain't got time to fix shingles, ain't got time to fix floor. Ain't got time to oil the hinges, turn them in the window pane. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, I'm getting ready to meet the saints. Oh, play along when Brenda. I'm tired. I'll let her do that a minute, and she'll poke me and tell me, "Go ahead, start singing." Now this old house is getting shaky, this old house is getting old. This old house lays in the rain and this old house lays in the cold. On my knees I'm feeling feeble, but I feel no fear nor pain, 'cause I see an angel peeking through a broken window pane. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, ain't gonna need this house no more. Ain't got time to fix shingles, ain't got time to fix floor. Ain't got time to oil the hinges nor to mend the window pane. Ain't gonna need this house no longer, I'm getting ready to meet the saints. Leave this house no longer. I'm getting ready to meet the saints. You know, cattle, trail drivers. After the Civil War was over, from what I understand, there were cattle everywhere because there hadn't been people here to really take care of them, and so they were gathering them up. I know it was either my great-granddad or my great-granddad. I get that confused, but they even drove cattle over here to Rockport. There's a walls of a rendering plant behind. I can't remember what the rest behind the pub over there. So my granddad at some point drove cattle over there, and so, you know, these guys, they were pretty tough individuals, you know, and they'd get friends with people, and maybe this group would go off on this trail drive, and this group would be over here catching cows and bringing them in and trying to get Texas back on the move again. But, you know, from time to time, they might run upon somebody that maybe they hadn't seen in you know, a couple of months, and they were just passing. They were just passing each other, and so maybe they might have said something like this. Oh, she's got a tune. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you, darling, until then. Don't worry about the clouds when we're together.
Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather.
Happy trails to you till we meet again. Close it, Brenda. Thank y'all. We've had a lot of fun singing to y'all today. I hope y'all enjoyed it.
I know everybody wants to go check out some of that Dutch oven cooking over there and check out the spurs and all the memorabilia over there and just visit a little bit.
Thank you.
She had to get the last word in.